Hello everyone, we're going to be reading some more of Video Game Design for Dummies to improve the way that I speak and to learn some more about what's inside this book. Today is Sunday the 18th of January, it is 5:49. We're going to set a timer for 20 minutes. There we are, let's go. Hey Siri, lock iPhone. So last we left off, we were looking into the psychological aspects of gaming. That's where we finished off on page 21. Let's just make sure that we did read everything before that. Punishment and friction, yeah, I remember that. Cool, so we've just done understanding player motivations. Yeah, awesome. Psychological aspects of gaming. In this section, I get a little more cerebral and dive into the psychological principles within more mechanical concepts that I discuss in previous sections. Part of your role as a game designer is to condition the player, that is, you're training the player how to play your game by rewarding them when they do something right and punishing them when they do something not quite right. One of the systems in our game Grift punished players for chatting with a non-playable character. One of the systems in our game Grift punished players for chatting with a non-playable character if they didn't have enough trust points. If they chatted 3 times, they were blocked by that character. We spent time tweaking how we signaled this to players and ultimately had the character threaten to block the player. When it became a strong verbal threat with every passing chat, we relied on societal norms, at least in the United States, for this. For example, first chat, I don't think I trust you enough to tell you about that. Second chat, you've already asked me that, don't do it again or else. Third chat, I'm blocking you, fool. Okay, interesting. But maybe if the players had trust with the character and chatted with them, they would get a monetary reward. The concept of this learning process that uses rewards and punishments to change players' behaviors is called operant conditioning. Operant conditioning. It's associated with behavioralists Edwards L. Thorndike and B.F. Skinner, who challenged various animals with puzzles or patterns and observed how they learned to overcome the challenge. So no matter your player's species? So no matter your player's species, this concept plays a huge role in influencing how players interact with your game and what keeps them coming back. I want to do a little looking into operant conditioning because it's not something that I've come across before as like a concept. So pop that there. Operant conditioning. Let's have a look on some kind of official website if we can. We'll try this. So it's reference to psychology. Type of learning in which new voluntary behavior is associated with consequence. Reinforcement makes this behavior more likely to occur, and punishment makes it less likely to occur. Okay. Yeah, so it's just it's the principles of using consequence to reinforce actions that you want to have happen. Cool. Yep. Rewards motivate players by reinforcing actions, making them more likely to repeat behaviors that lead to something beneficial. Different types of rewards include extrinsic rewards. These are tangible incentives like coins, power-ups, new skins, or loot boxes. For example, completing a quest earns gold or a shiny gear upgrade. So anything externally from the actual process of playing or doing the thing is an external reward. Intrinsic rewards, the satisfaction that comes from personal achievement or mastery. For example, the pride of solving a difficult puzzle or nailing a tricky performance sequence. Nailing a tricky platforming sequence, my bad. You see how I don't know if it is my brain. I didn't read platforming there. I just kind of my eyes almost glazed over and I just said what I thought would be there instead of what was actually there. Very interesting. Not new for me, but just interesting. And then as we've talked about Dark Souls and the Souls games, intrinsic rewards are the joy of learning a Dark Souls game or a Monster Hunter game. I think that it's the best way to play. It is so rewarding. Social rewards. Recognition or interaction with others, such as leaderboard rankings, community praise, or a belly laugh from a joke that landed better than you would have thought. It's interesting. In my opinion, I think social rewards are usually, in games, especially competitive ones, the least good, in my opinion. I don't know many people who use social acumen or acclaim as like a positive thing. It's always used condescendingly. At least for me, it's like, oh, I am this rank. And then if you say your rank and it's not a particular threshold of rank, or even if it is, you're just considered like dog shit. Regardless, like I've never seen in my personal experience social reward of like a rank or a leaderboard position be something good. Unless you're at the top, I don't think social rewards are actually all that useful. That's just me. At least in games or competitive games. Punishment discourage actions or choices that hinder the game flow. They don't necessarily have to feel harsh, but they should encourage learning or better play and can either be positive or negative. Positive punishments. Do something wrong and the game adds something unpleasant to discourage you from doing it again. In Elden Ring, attacking a helpful NPC turns them into a deadly enemy. Negative punishments. Mess up and the game takes away something you like. It's a bummer and teaches you to play smarter. In Animal Crossing, if you neglect your town, your favorite villagers might pack their bags and leave. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Positive punishments. I don't see that being a positive punishment. I think they're being pedantic in that, actually. I think that the example of, in Elden Ring, attacking an NPC turns them into a deadly enemy, that's just a punishment. I don't think that's a positive punishment. Like, to say a positive punishment would, to me, infer that the act of doing the punishment is beneficial to, like, something else, and then the act of, like, a negative punishment or a true punishment would be to go, don't fucking do that. Like, that's our boundary, that's our no-go zone. But yeah, it just seems like they're just separating things for the sake of separating things. I don't particularly believe in the idea that there is a positive punishment or a negative punishment. It's all interpretation. Like, if the positive punishment is supposed to tell you that you don't attack NPCs, okay. But if a negative punishment is to tell you that if you neglect your town, your favorite villagers will leave, that's just the same kind. That's exactly the same thing in my mind, at the very, very least. Okay, we've got to remember. Remember, rewards and punishments are most effective when delivered quickly, with positive or negative reinforcement the player can understand. Tip. Think about the pace of rewards and punishment when you're designing a game. Give players rewards after every set action, like killing a boss, so they know when it's coming. Throw in some random rewards too, keep things surprising, mix it up. Although operant conditioning focuses on voluntary, conscious behaviors that are influenced and shaped by their consequences, respondent conditioning refers to learning through involuntary, reflexive responses triggered by a stimulus. You don't have to learn these behaviors. There's no come in that sentence. This could be something like the following. Pulling your hand back from a hot stove, jerking your leg when the doctor taps on your knee, at low health making you feel a sense of urgency, responding to the rhythm of a beat game. Tip. A great flow for conditioning players is to show them how to do something, let them try it, reward them for good behaviors, and set them back for poor behaviors. Types of player motivation. Motivation in games comes in two flavors, intrinsic and extrinsic. One comes from the heart and the other comes from all the shiny stuff you can collect. Intrinsic motivation is powered by what the player enjoys or is interested in. Players with intrinsic motivation play the game because they genuinely enjoy the activity. Intrinsic motivation is about what drives them, so interests, values, and that inner spark. Why they stick around, the activity itself is the reward, and even if they're not making progress. An example, a player might keep exploring every nook and cranny of an open world game just because they're curious, not because they're trying to win. Extrinsic motivation is powered by outside factors. Players with extrinsic motivations want rewards or money, recognition, or a sweet pat on the back for their efforts. Extrinsic motivation is about what drives them, the loot, the badges, the leaderboard glory. What keeps them going? They want the rewards, achievements, or praise that comes with success. Example, grinding levels in an RPG to get that flaming sword, or aiming for 100% achievement completion. Great games tap into both types of motivation to give players the freedom to enjoy the experience just for the fun of it, while also dangling some tasty rewards to keep them moving forward. Creating meaningful experiences. Games don't always have to be fun in the traditional sense. They can be engaging by being meaningful. Having meaning is particularly important in a manufactured game between players. I made up so many words in that sentence. Games don't always have to be fun in a traditional sense. They can be engaging by being meaningful. Having meaning is particularly important in a manufactured game because players, as I put players in there too early as well. Having meaning is particularly important in a manufactured game because as players, we are trying to find patterns and make predictions, no two. Games are so great because they're in a controlled environment. In a world in which most things can happen to us are by chance and out of our control. And this can be a nice escape. Meaning in games can take many forms, such as having a lot of choice and agency. This means players will have the freedom to make decisions that impact the game world, their character or story. These choices should feel impactful with clear outcomes or consequences, reminding the player that they have influence over the world. Making people feel emotion. They can craft moments that evoke feelings like joy, sadness, fear, or even frustration. Games like The Last of Us or Heavy Rain come to mind. Giving players a challenge to overcome. Maybe the game tests players' skills, creativity, or perseverance. A well-designed challenge engages people and offers a sense of accomplishment when they try to beat it. Remember, on the flip side, an experience may not be meaningful because the player doesn't know what the point of the game is, or maybe they are confused. The game lacks agency. It's too linear or on rails. The player might feel like their actions don't matter. The mechanics feel stale and static. If the core mechanics are repetitive or haven't evolved, gameplay can feel dull. If the rules, law, or environment of the game aren't consistent or don't make sense, it can break the player's immersion. The player isn't getting feedback about which actions to take to progress, and they feel lost. Rewards are monotonous, very same, or lack value. Remember, a meaningful experience comes from intentional design choices. Your player should feel involved, challenged, and emotionally connected to the world and the story. Creating agency and immersion. Immersion is the feeling of being fully absorbed or lost in a game, in which players forget about the real world and become completely engaged in the game world. Having the power to make choices and affect their environment to feel like they are part of the story will increase immersion and of an experience. I think another interesting thing about immersion is that I would compare it a lot to being in the zone for athletes. I also feel like the more you play a game, the less immersive that you are in the game, as you are physically aware of the game as an entity itself. But that's me personally. I think of when I'm build crafting, or if I see people who've played thousands of hours of something like Baldur's Gate, like that's a very set experience, and therefore I don't think that someone like that is immersed in the game. They are just playing the game through the lens of like something else, which I think is fine and very, very interesting for immersion. It's like how immersive does your game need to be to gather casual like enjoyment or fans versus how good are the systems that people will play it even when they aren't immersed in the world anymore because they become too proficient with the systems. Some ways to offer more immersion in your designs are as follows. Offer a branching choices that affect narrative or gameplay. If I went back and redid Chief Emoji Officer, I'd add more branches and choices. This doesn't mean that your game needs to grow wildly in choices, though. Agency or sense of unlimited choices can be cleverly faked. In games like The Walking Dead by Telltale, for example, many of the choices may seem like they lead to different resolutions, but in the end they all branch back to the same narrative path. Sometimes players just want to feel like they had agency. Allow players to change the world in some meaningful way, like unlocking areas or changing the environment. Civilization does a good job of this because you can discover new areas and build on newly found land. Let players control their pace, whether through exploration, decision-making, or customizing their characters. An example of this is in Red Dead Redemption, in which you can do a lot of side quests or explore the desert while you hope you don't get killed by a cougar. Remember, something to keep in mind when adding lots of choices or agency is that the amount of content you need to make will also increase, and you may need to account for how large your systems or user interface are. For example, if we added 100 more choices to Chief Emoji Officer, we would need to add more written narrative and more unlockable emojis, endings, and more information to the chapter summary. Adding more agency can increase the scope of your game. I introduced scope in Chapter 3 and discuss it further in Chapter 13. Okay, scope of game. Chapter 3 is overviewing the game design process, exploring the phases of a game's design, setting design intentions, and managing scope. And Chapter 13, which I think we have been over before, is more of scope. Building your game concept, no design in that sentence, refining the concept, setting the scope, determining the goals, documenting your game, finding an audience. Got it. Making players feel something. Emotion is a huge part of why players get invested, whether it's joy, sadness, or fear. Create moments that make players care about what is happening. What's happening? There is no... I'm being pedantic, but still, it's important. About what's happening. Some ways to make players feel something are as follows. Crafting scenes and narratives that focus on character development or emotional stakes. See Chapter 8, where I discuss creating compelling narratives and building believable worlds. Chapter 8, we've probably already said it in a previous video, but it is incorporating story in games, telling a story, and designing worlds. Use sound and music to set the tone. An intense beat in a fast-paced scene can create a lot of tension. Create dilemmas that make players question their choices and feel interested in the outcome. Balancing challenge. A well-balanced challenge keeps players engaged. If it's too easy, they'll get bored. If it's too hard, they'll get frustrated. The sweet spot is where players feel challenged but capable of overcoming obstacles with some effort. Different audiences and games tolerate more friction, so balancing the challenge of your game typically has to do with who you expect to play your game. Sometimes, someone who plays Dark Souls may have a higher capability for challenge over someone who's expecting Animal Crossing. Okay. Someone who plays Dark Souls may have a higher capability, not capacity. Someone who plays Dark Souls may have a higher capability for challenge over someone who's expecting Animal Crossing. Some ways to balance challenge are as follows. Start players on simple challenges and gradually introduce harder obstacles as they learn a strategy for beating them. Give players the right tools to succeed, but let them experiment and discover how to use them effectively. This also gives players agency to choose their strategy. Provide ways for players to learn from mistakes and keep going without feeling like they're stuck. This is just a quick overview of balancing your game. See Chapter 11 for an in-depth discussion of this topic. And Chapter 11 is what game balance is, and it's part of the Part 3 Balancing Your Game. Defining game balance, learning design guidelines for game balance, and digging into the data in games. Implementing difficulty curves. A difficulty curve is how a game's challenge ramps up over time. The key is to ramp up difficulty slowly so if players don't feel overwhelmed. Gradually increasing the challenge helps them build their skills without feeling stuck. Make sure the game gets harder at a pace that feels natural and rewarding. As an example, I like to use the starting area of World of Warcraft. A major part of that game is questing. So what do you do when you spawn into the world? One single quest. So I completely made up everything in that fucking sentence. It is not what you do, it is what you see. An example I like to use is the starting area of World of Warcraft. A major part of that game is questing. So what do you see when you spawn into the world? One single quest right nearby, you take that quest and off you go to collect some old shoes or kill some pigeons in the field. These first quests are meant to be easy so that players can learn the patterns of the quest system and start exploring the world. As you quest further, maybe you venture further out and encounter a level 50 that instantly kills you. And that's time. It's a good thing you can resurrect. Some ways to design with a difficulty curve are as follows. Introduce basic challenges early on, and then slowly layer in complexity, like adding new mechanics or enemies. Make sure the player can easily understand what's expected at each stage and what's coming next. Use feedback loops. Praise players when they succeed and gently guide them when they fail. In the early stages of your game, the difficulty should be easy since players are still learning the ropes. Then over time, as they play longer and learn more, you can exponentially increase the difficulty so they have to develop new strategies to overcome the obstacles. And that is where we will end things off. On page 27, so we read 6 pages, I believe. I think we started on page 21. And we will be picking up with designing with flow in mind in our next video. Thank you guys so much. Again, this entire thing is inspired by Kai Cenat, so thank you so much to him. Hope you guys are so well. Stay safe, look after yourself, and I'll see you very soon. Goodbye.